I'm Adekunle and Olumide, OON. After leaving the university, I joined the Nigerian Foreign Service, and I served in various countries. New York, the formal mission to the UN was my first posting. Thereafter, I served in Geneva. While in Geneva, I was also covering Vienna, Austria, because there was no Nigerian embassy at that time. And after the Civil War, I was selected as the chargé d'affaires to open the embassy in Gabon, because during the Civil War, Gabon recognized Biafra, so there was need to normalize relations. So I did that, and after 14 years in the service, for personal reasons, I voluntarily decided to transfer to the Home Service, and rose rapidly to be permanent secretary in 1988. And so in 1991, the service was changing. The nomenclature for the chief executive, accounting officer, was changed from permanent secretary to director general, and a lot of developments occurred around that time. As I said, I joined in 1991. So from 1991 to 2005, I was the DG. A lot of activities took place during that period. A lot of advocacy, public policy advocacy, which is the fundamental responsibility of every business association. And the Lagos Chamber has excelled other business associations in that respect, because we promoted the interests of our members, the business community as a whole, and also created and facilitated opportunities for commercial and industrial activities. And also we try to maintain among our members the highest standard of business ethics. Apart from public policy advocacy, which is the core duty of the Chamber has also engaged in a lot of trade promotional activities. One major one is the Lagos International Trade Fair, which was previously handled by the federal government, but the federal government felt the private sector would better handle it. That was how the Lagos Chamber was chosen to be the organizer of the annual Lagos International Trade Fair. And since the Lagos Chamber has been engaged in it, it's been very successful. The only regrets I have personally is that when we had the opportunity and applied for the Lagos International Trade Fair Complex in Badagry to be handed over to the Lagos Chamber, government did not approve at that time. Instead, they let out the facilities to traders and all sorts of people, and the place has been run down, which is unfortunate, because I was in the public service when it was built. It was tailor-made for exhibition and trade fairs, but the whole place has run down. At that time, it had its own water, electricity, and everything. It was built, I think, by a company from Yugoslavia at that time. However, when the Lagos Chamber took over, what we normally do, we pay some rent and then organize the trade fair. And I believe a lot of improvement has taken place since then. Later on, when somebody else bought it, when another company bought the trade fair site, they tried to create more difficulties that forced the Lagos Chamber to decide to move away and depend on the Tafawa Balewa Square which has very limited space. But all the same, the chamber has been able to use the facilities there. And as I'm speaking to you, for this year's trade fair, everything was online. That was a huge improvement, because in the past, there was a lot of argument about the size of land when you want to allocate to exhibitors and so on. Some exhibitors will expand the land that they've been given, but because of the confusion and the crowd, and it was really difficult to check. But right now, everything is online. The space is well drawn, and you just apply for the space, the specific space you are given. It's not possible for that space to alter and so on. So that, I believe, is a huge because trade fairs are a very effective trade promotional activity, and it's just a pity that Nigeria, the dream we had at independence, hasn't realized. We've not been able to realize the dream. Otherwise, during the Lagos International Trade Fair, we should be exhibiting a lot of products made in Nigeria. But we've been toying with the idea because of lack of proper governance. The iron and steel complex was not put in place. The machine tool industry. These are basic industries without which you cannot really develop. You can't manufacture. With the result that most of those things that should have been produced by these basic industries were now importing at great of expense with the scarce foreign exchange. So during the Lagos International Trade Fair, of course, the exhibitors do exhibit a few things that are made in Nigeria, but in most cases we have foreign exhibitors who come and sort of display what they manufacture and all that. I would have wished that we had the proportion should have been reversed, so that we exhibit more of things which have been produced in Nigeria. I think the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry has been lucky in that respect, because when I was the CEO, the current Director General CEO was the Principal Research Officer. So he had a lot of time to be trained and to mature into the position. And I hope that policy will be followed, and that is why the current DG is very efficient and very effective. It's because he was not appointed DG overnight. He went through the process. He was a brilliant Principal Research Officer. As a matter of fact, he came in, there were two of them who are very brilliant, himself and Ayo Teriba, who later went to the Lagos Business School and has set up, is a huge economic consultant currently. Himself and the current DG came in about the same time before he left for the Lagos Business School. So there is that opportunity to transfer knowledge, not only the technical knowledge, the management knowledge, and so on. So Lagos Chamber is lucky on that. As I said earlier on, the fundamental role of the Lagos Chamber or any business association worth its salt is to promote the interests of its members and the business community, and also through public policy advocacy. That means with government and all that, and then creating and facilitating commercial, industrial opportunities for its members to operate. The public advocacy aspect is very, very vital because, for instance, some economic policies might have been enunciated by the public sector because they lacked knowledge, or they lacked knowledge of the operation of the private sector. But the chamber does make representation to government from time to time on various issues, so as to protect the interests of its members. And through that, the chamber has had some impact, maybe catalytic, but impact on economic policy formulation, which is a major area. Every year, before the budget is prepared, the Lagos Chamber and the organized private sector, Manufacturer Association of Nigeria, NASIMA, they get together and submit memoranda to government, pre-budget memorandum, which will contain proposals on what to do about small and medium enterprises, what to do about taxation, particularly where you have multiplicity of taxation. Federal is taxing states, local governments, and all that. So all those issues are usually articulated in those memoranda, which will go to the federal government. That is one way to influence economic policy. I may digress a little to say that, because you are talking of evolution of Lagos Chamber in 130 years. Much as it is true, it was started by Europeans, traders from Liverpool and so on. Later on, the first Nigerian to be president of the chamber, I believe, was in the early 19th century, about 1924, thereabout. Mr. Thomas from Lagos here. He was the first, and the chamber was very influential at that time. The chamber used to have a seat in the Legislative Council in Lagos. This long before independence, in the colonial time, because they recognized that when they are going to discuss commerce, business, and so on, they needed representation from the business sector. And the only chamber at that time was the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, until about 1960, when NASIMA and the rest were created. Now, and the activities of the Lagos Chamber have also expanded astronomically since that time. Apart from public policy advocacy, I've mentioned the issue of trade promotion, international trade fairs, and also outward and incoming trade missions, which are very helpful, because when you go out, it's then easier for you to link up, particularly when they go out to developed countries. They link up with those who will have interest in their business, and they can also convince some of those from abroad to come and set up, and that is part of promoting investment. The chamber did a lot of that. And also, a very key aspect of the role of the chamber was the creation of the Lagos Chamber International Arbitration Center. The idea about it started while I was still in the chamber, and I remember the late Dr. Lateef Adekunle was the main driver. He was a lawyer of the arbitration center. But I'm happy that now it has been fully established, and it engages in mediation, alternative dispute resolution, because business people, they don't like going to court, because to start with, the time the normal courts take, and then secondly, issue of lack of transparency, corruption, and then the time it takes. So if business companies have any dispute of a commercial nature, they would rather go to the Lagos Chamber Arbitration Center rather than go to the normal courts. That the chamber did, which is a big improvement. I believe is the only chamber in Nigeria, probably in West Africa, that has an international arbitration center of repute. And also, in terms of the services provided to its members, the trade groups, the sectoral groups, and the service committees have really expanded astronomically to the advantage of the members. For instance, the export group is a new one. Now they also have public and international affairs group. When I was there, particularly when organizing outward trade missions, we used to have dealings with the embassies on ad hoc basis to facilitate visa and also get assistance from the various embassies. But what has happened recently is that this process has been better formalized by having a specific sectoral group that relates with the various embassies, and that has been very helpful. I remember when I was there, we had an engagement with the Germans, GTZ. They helped us to set up the business service units at the time. But right now, other countries have done similar things, Austria and so on. And that's because the chamber itself organized itself to be able to relate with the various foreign embassies and so on. That also is a big plus on the part of the chamber. And the chamber also, as part of their sort of innovation, now relates with some external chambers of commerce to carry out specific functions which benefit not only their members but benefit the Nigerian government. I'll give an instance. The US Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which is the largest chamber in the world, had an agreement with the Lagos Chamber. They set up to sort of look into the difficulties of port operations in Nigeria, in Apapa, Tinkan Island, and so on. And they came up with a very beautiful book, because it's quite, well, one may not call it a book, but they came up with a nice report, which I'm aware of because I read the report. And that report has been of assistance to the Ministry of Transport, to the Nigerian Ports Authority. So these are some of the innovative ways which the Lagos Chamber has made itself more relevant. Well, my advice would be that the chamber should never rest on its oars. It should try to innovate and improve structure and well orderly. So I think all those processes should continue. The same thing with the management. the selection process and so on should continue. But I think some advantage should be given to those staff who have gone through the ranks within the chamber itself. But of course, when they are having recruitment, there could be competition, but it should be borne in mind that, and that is why I'm making this point, is that the current Director General is so effective and efficient, partly because he rose from within the chamber, he understands it. So that is a usual. So I think the succession process should continue in that manner.